Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. This is Gateways number 4. Today we're going to be discussing slightly more advanced chord structures, as last time we spent the majority of the podcast talking about intervals and triadic harmony. And for this one, we're mainly going to be remaining in, it will be diatonic and non-diatonic. So let's just get started. So with the last episode, I did discuss briefly what a seventh chord was, but today I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on that, as well as the other tensions that can be added to a chord. So to start off, what is a seventh chord? Well, a seventh chord is the addition of a diatonic triad above a normal triad. So a C major, which would be C, E, and G, with the next diatonic seventh would be a C major 7, which would be the natural B. And the addition of this diatonic third above the fifth of a triad creates the seventh chord. And in triads there are only 3 intervallic relationships, whereas in seventh there are a lot more, because you have, with the major chord you have first to third, third to fifth, and then first to fifth, whereas in a seventh chord you have first to third, first to fifth, first to seventh, third to fifth, third to seventh, and fifth to seventh. So it's a lot more complex and, in a way, a lot more colorful. Now, the way that you define the difference between a C7 and C major 7 is, with a major 7, you have the root, a major third, a perfect fifth, and a major 7th, which creates C major 7 in the case of C. And then, you have a C minor 7 when it's a minor third, perfect fifth, and minor 7th from the root. And then, if you want a dominant 7, or just in the case of C, a C7, it's a major third, perfect fifth, and minor 7th. So, looking back at our C major example, you have a C major 7, which is C, E, G, B, and then you have C7, which is C, E, G, B flat. And then you also have a minor 7 flat 5, so that would be a minor third, diminished fifth, minor 7th from the root. You also have augmented, which is an augmented triad with a minor 7th. You have a diminished, which is a diminished triad with a diminished 7th. And just note for the diminished 7th chord, diminished 7th interval is sometimes written enharmonically. You also have a minor major 7th, which is a minor triad with a major 7th added on top. And these are all the different names that you have. You also have instead of the 7th chord, you have the 6th chords, which is a major 6th and the minor 6th. So you have a major triad with an added 6th, or a minor triad with an added 6th. In the case of C major, that's C, E, G, A. In the case of C minor, that's C, E flat, G, A. You also have dominant 7 sus 4, which is you have the suspended 4th triad, which is C, F, G with a minor 7th. So that would be a B flat if you're in the key of C major. Now, why are we talking about these more advanced chord structures? Well, more advanced chord structures add a lot of color to whatever piece you're making. They make it a lot more interesting to listen to because, basic triadic harmony doesn't include a lot of tension resolution. It's very flat at times. If you have a more dense harmonic space, then it can be very useful for trying to truly convey certain emotions, or especially if you're trying to tell a story with your music. Having a higher level of color is very important. Now, this isn't to say that all of your chords should be extremely complex, because that can end up sounding like there isn't really a direction. But knowing where to properly use these more advanced chord structures can really prove to be beneficial in creating more intricate and interesting music for your audience. So moving on from that, I think before I discuss inversion, I'll discuss the other tension. So, what's a tension? Well, we just finished talking about seventh chords. A tension is an extension off of the seventh chord, still in, commonly in intervals of diatonic thirds, like sevenths. So you have the first, the third, and the fifth of a triad, then you have the seventh, then you have the ninth, the 11th, and the 13th, which are the other tensions. And why is this? Well, they're called tensions because anything larger than a seventh exceed the octave and create different intervallic relationships, which are more tense than the simple octave or less intervals of triads and seventh. No matter like what inversion it is, triad or seventh chord. All the intervals in a triad or seventh chord are less than an octave in size. So the way it's made is, again, like I said before, you're extending seventh chords and thirds as far as possible, right? So that means that in reality you get 21 different intervals if you have something like a 13th that includes every diatonic third, because you would have the relationship of 1 to 3, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, 1 to 9, 1 to 11, 1 to 13, and all the relations of those intervals with one another. And that's very colorful, especially considering that if you follow this, you end up creating very interesting interaction between, I believe, if my memory does not fail me, I believe the first and the 11th have a very strange relationship with one another when played. It's very tense. Now, because of these like tense relationships, they're given the name tension. Whereas, 1, 3, 5, and 7 are considered chord tones, 9, 11, and 13 are the chord's possible tensions. So, with a C major, you can have like C major 7, you can have C major 9, C major 11, C major 13. And it all has to do with the relationship, not only from this new tension that you just added, but also the relationship between all the other intervals, which create a certain form of tension. Now, as we've talked about before, tension and release are very, very important in music, because if you don't have any tension, then the music's really boring. If there's all tension and no resolution, then it'll leave, your listener wanting more. Now, it's very important to make sure you balance tension and resolution. You don't want to make your piece too resolved, again, because it's boring. You don't want to make it too tense because, the listener expects it to resolve somewhere, and sometimes you need to give them the satisfaction of it resolving. But learning to balance these tensions and creating these more complex chord structures and chord progressions is very important. If you want a good example of that, I'd recommend checking out some of the jazz reharmonizations that Adam Neely has done of different pop songs, because they are very useful in, hearing about how exactly do you balance tension and resolution. Now, now I think it'll be good to move on to inversion, because if you can understand inversion, then it makes other things make more sense. So let's just jump into it. So inverting triads is just like you're bringing the bottom pitch of a chord up an octave. So like if it's C major, you're taking that C, putting it an octave above, and now the root note would be E, right? So there are technically 2 inversions of a triad, because you can only move it 2 times. You have the root position, which is C, E, G. You have first inversion, which is E, G, C. And you have second inversion, which is G, C, E. And then, if you invert it again, it would just be root position, but an octave up. And that's because there are only 3 possible choices. Now, if you have a 7th chord, that means that there are 3 inversions, because first, you have the root position, first inversion where the 3rd is on the bottom, second inversion where the 5th is on the bottom, and third inversion where the 7th is on the bottom. So that's how the concept of that's how the concept of inversion works with chords. Now, of course, with tensions, you can go even further. Like, if you have a 9 in there, then you can technically... Well, no, you can't really go past third inversion, because what'll kind of end up happening is if you have the 9th, which in the case of C major would be a D, that means you'd have C, E, G, B, D, and if you invert that to its third inversion, right, that means you have B, but then C, D, C, D, E, G. You invert that again, you're at root position with the 9th now being a second, and then you can technically, pull the C up another octave to have the D on the bottom, followed by E, G, B, C. I believe that you could technically call that the fourth inversion, even though the order, if you exclude D as a note in that case, would be the first inversion, but because the D is there, I believe you could call that the fourth inversion of a chord. Which, that's interesting to think about. Now you have a going back to tension, right? You have a very large number of available tensions. For the major 7, you can apply that tension, like the major 7 as in, the relationship, not the chord type. You can apply a major 7 on a major 7 chord, a minor major 7 chord, a major 6, or a minor 6. You have the 9, which you can put on all chords when they're diatonic. You have the flat 9 or the sharp 9, which you can put on the dominant 7th, so that would be like C, E, G, B flat, like D flat or D sharp. And then you can also sometimes put it on a dominant 7 sus4. It's a little more rare though. You can put an 11 on all minor chords, and it's kind of a chord tone. Yeah, it is a chord tone on a dominant 7 sus4. You can put a sharp 11 on major 7 and major 6 when diatonic to the key, as well as on dominant 7ths and augmented 7ths. You can put a flat 13 on a minor 7 flat 5 and a dominant 7th, and you can put a normal 13 on a major 7th, a minor major 7th, a dominant 7th, and a dominant 7th sus4. Now, that's not law, those aren't rules. They're just like, over time, they've been the places where they seem to be the most effective. You can still put them wherever you want, because a lot of creating, the color that you want in your piece is by ear. You have to think, do I like that sound? Does it convey the message I want it to? Now, one thing for like notating this kind of music, because you'll see it if you're using a DAW too, is that when you're writing down what chord you're using, if you're using a chord structure, a tension that is not normally, a part of a chord, you have to put it in the symbol. For example, if you have like a C major 7, C major implies that only 9 and 13 are available to be used. So if you wanted to add something like a sharp 11, you have to notate that it's there. So with that being done, that would be the end of our brief segment on more advanced chord structures. Now, this segment is a little bit shorter than some of the other ones, just because this is kind of the what you use to bridge into actual like diatonic and non-diatonic harmony, which will be discussed it will be after the next episode. So it'll be next Saturday relative to, what time it is today. So in a week from now, we'll be discussing diatonic harmony, because next time we'll be talking about intonation and tuning systems, just because, one trap you should never fall into is that music is static. in that we only use one system. You're not allowed to deviate from that system. So I'm going to be talking about that. But overall, just as a general message, even though I just gave a lot of the rules that are present for like more advanced chord structures, there are still a lot more that you can implement. It's all kind of relative to what nuanced story you want to tell with color and harmony. And if you're interested in looking into more, intricate chord structures than the ones that are going to be discussed right now, then you can actually look into, in the resources segment of the drive, there's a copy of the 20th Century Harmony, and that book, I will say it's very complicated to read if you don't have a very good understanding of music theory, but it can be very helpful if you want to try to explore more intricate harmonic ideas, especially if you want to go more in depth into what's been talked about today. I believe for at least the first segment is all about things like tensions and intervallic relationships and the like. So if you want to go further in depth into that, then you can definitely at least attempt to read that book. I know it's still complex for me to read this book. It's very dense with knowledge and what can be used. I know somewhere it talks about things like mirror harmony, which is incredibly complicated, especially in trying to figure out where exactly you use it. But overall, I think it's a really interesting book to read. And with that, I'll call off the end of this episode, the end of episode 4. This one's going, of course, a little bit shorter because it's kind of the bridge between just looking at, interval relationships and then looking at harmony as a whole, like diatonic and non-diatonic harmony. There won't be an assignment for this one because that assignment will come with when we start talking about chord progressions and harmony. But for today, I'll say goodbye, everyone. Wish you a pleasant morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever time it is, and have a good one. And if you have time, just try writing some music, see how it goes. So goodbye.